I almost didn't go that weekend. I want to say that right at the start because it matters to me. I almost didn't go. 6 weeks I'd been planning this. Solo backpacking, 3 nights in the Oconee National Forest in Georgia. I remember sitting at my desk one afternoon, fluorescent lights, someone's microwaved lunch in the air, the same spreadsheet I'd been staring at for 3 hours, and I pulled up the trail map on my second monitor and just looked at it. That was the whole reason. That moment. I needed to go somewhere that felt real. I parked at the trailhead on a Friday afternoon, laced up my boots, and started walking. The forest in late September is something else. The light comes through the trees at this low angle, and everything looks golden and soft. The air smells like leaves starting to turn, like something sweet going slowly bad in the best possible way. My pack was heavy, but I was used to it. I had 3 days of food, a good tent, a water filter, and no cell service. I told my roommate where I was going. He said cool and went back to his game. That was the last time anyone knew where I was. I made good time on the first day, hit my planned campsite by 4 in the afternoon, a flat clearing near a creek that I'd marked on my paper map months before. I'd never been to this part of the forest. Most people don't come this far in. That was the whole point. I set up my tent, filtered some water, and started cooking. The creek was loud enough to cover small sounds, which I liked. It felt like white noise. It felt like being alone in the best way. And that's when I noticed the fire ring. Someone had already built one. That wasn't unusual. People camp in clearings, they leave fire rings, it's normal. But this one was off to the side of the clearing, in a spot that didn't make sense. Not centered, not near flat ground. It was half hidden by a low branch, almost tucked away. Like it was meant to be hard to see from the trail. I looked at it for a second, and then I looked away. I told myself it was nothing. I ate my dinner and watched the light die in the trees and listened to the creek and went to bed early. I slept fine. That first night I slept completely fine. But when I woke up just before dawn, I lay there for a full minute before I understood why. The creek was still running. The birds hadn't started yet. Everything was exactly as it should be. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something outside had been waiting for me to wake up first. I broke camp with the first light and kept moving deeper in. I was planning to loop around and hit a ridge I'd read about on a hiking forum before the trip. The trail got thinner as I went. More roots, more mud, less foot traffic. I like that. The feeling of going somewhere most people don't bother going. About 2 hours in, I found the first piece of gear. A rain jacket hanging from a branch. Bright blue. Good quality brand, the kind that costs real money. It was hanging neatly, like someone put it there on purpose. Both sleeves draped over the branch, hood hanging down. I stopped and stood there, and the only sound was the wind moving through the upper branches, slow and steady, and the jacket shifting just slightly with it. Dry. Which meant it had been there at least since before the rain 2 days ago, maybe longer. My first thought was that someone had taken it off because they were hot and forgot it. That happens. People leave things. I've left things. One time I left a brand new water bottle at a campsite and didn't realize until I was back at my car. I kept walking. An hour later I smelled something. I was crossing a dry creek bed, stepping from rock to rock, and the smell came from downstream. Faint at first, then heavier. Like something had been cooked, or like a fire, but older. Ash. And something underneath the ash that I didn't want to think about too closely. Something that made the back of my throat feel thick. I breathed through my mouth for a while after that. The ridge was everything the forum said it was. I ate lunch up there and looked out at the trees stretching in every direction and tried to feel the peace I'd driven 4 hours for. And it was almost there, Almost. But I kept thinking about the jacket, the way it was hanging, the sleeves. I made camp that second night in a small flat spot just below the ridge. Good ground, good drainage. I was picking tent stakes out of my bag when I noticed the mark on the tree nearest to me. It was cut into the bark. A horizontal line, clean, about 6 inches long. Chest height on me, not an animal mark. Too straight, too deliberate. I stood there with a tent stake in my hand, and I looked at that mark, and I felt something in my chest that I want to describe as a door closing somewhere deep inside me. Not panic. Not yet. Just a quiet, careful closing. One mark on one tree is nothing. People mark trails. Hunters mark territories. Kids mess around in the woods with knives. I hammered in my stakes and made dinner and kept the knife from my pack inside the tent with me that night. The creek here was quieter, and I could hear more. Wind in the upper branches. The settling sounds of the forest going dark. And once, maybe an hour after I'd gotten into my sleeping bag, something moving through leaves at a distance. Not close, but not far either. An animal, I told myself. A deer, probably. It moved in a straight line, and then it stopped. I lay still and counted my own heartbeats for a while, and eventually I stopped counting. In the morning, I found the campsite. I want to be clear about what I mean when I say campsite. I don't mean a clearing with a fire ring. I mean a full setup, a tent, still standing. A good 4-season tent that cost probably $400. A camp chair, open, set facing a dead fire pit. A cook stove sitting on a flat rock with a pot still on it. A pair of trekking poles leaned against a tree on either side of the tent entrance, like two guards standing at attention. Everything was arranged. Everything was neat. Nobody was there. I stood at the edge of that clearing for a long time before I took a single step closer. I want you to understand that. I didn't rush in. Something in my body was telling me to stay at the edge, and I listened to it, really listened, for longer than felt reasonable. Then I got closer. The pot on the stove had water in it. Old water, covered in a thin film with a few pine needles floating on top. The fire pit had ash that was completely cold. The camp chair had a damp ring on the seat from rain, which meant it had been sitting open for at least 2 days. Maybe more. The tent zipper was closed. I stood in front of it for a moment. My mouth was dry. The air around that clearing felt still in a way that the rest of the forest hadn't. Like the sound had been turned down, I was aware of my own breathing in a way I hadn't been all trip. I unzipped it. Sleeping bag inside, unrolled, laid out flat. A book, face down, spine up, like someone had set it down mid-chapter and planned to come right back. A headlamp hanging from the loop at the top of the tent. A small leather notebook tucked against the side wall. The notebook was open. I know I should have left. I know that. And I crouched down in the entrance of that stranger's tent, and I read what was on the open page anyway. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a warning. It was a list of dates. 7 of them, going back about 2 weeks, each with a short note beside it. Things like, checked South Trail again. Heard movement near the creek before sunrise. Same mark on the 3rd tree past the boulder, didn't move it. The last entry had no note beside it, just a date. 4 days ago. I zipped the tent closed. I stood up and I looked at the trees around that clearing, and I thought, very clearly, this person was watching for something. And then the second thought came right behind it, quieter and much worse. This person was also being watched. My pack was a mile back at my own camp. I walked back fast, not running. I want to say I ran, but I didn't. I walked with my head up and my eyes moving across every gap between the trees. My hands were free at my sides. I kept my breathing even on purpose, because I was afraid if I let it go it wouldn't come back even. The forest felt different on that walk. Same trail, same trees. But the silence had a different quality now. Not empty, just held back. Like something in it had decided to be very, very still. I broke camp in 11 minutes. I know because I checked my watch when I started and again when I finished. 11 minutes. I've never packed that fast in my life, and I didn't fold anything, I didn't sort anything, I just compressed and clipped and walked. 4 miles to the trailhead. I took every step on the main path, and I did not look back more than I had to. I got to my car just after 2 in the afternoon. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, and I didn't start the engine for a full minute. My hands were shaking. Not violently, just a fine, steady shaking that I couldn't make stop, no matter how hard I pressed my palms against the steering wheel. I drove to the nearest gas station and called the county sheriff's office from a payphone, because my phone still had no signal. I told them what I found. The campsite, the gear, the notebook. The woman on the phone was polite. She took down the location. She said they'd send someone out to check. I don't know if they did. I don't know what they found if they went. I searched online for weeks afterward and never found any missing person report that matched. No news story, no name, nothing. I've thought about that notebook a lot since then. The handwriting was calm and even. That's the part that stays with me. The list was written by someone who was frightened, I think, someone who had been watching and waiting and getting more careful with each passing day, and their handwriting was completely steady, which means they had been afraid for long enough that it had started to feel normal. I've been back to that trailhead twice since then. Not to hike, just to sit in my car in the parking lot and look at the tree line where the trail disappears into the dark between the trees. I don't know what I'm looking for. I think that's the part that stays with me most.